Codebusters. That was cheesy, but hey, it is what it is. Here we are, special edition of Uncork's Twitch channel with the Uncoder about the Codebusters. You know, when you're afraid, when there's something bad in your code, who are you going to call? The Codebusters, because we ain't afraid of no code, right? So there it is. We ain't afraid of no code. Best line I think we've come up with in my 4 years at Uncork. We got to run with this one. So what Codebusters is and what we're doing today, maybe the first of many of these, particularly with the Halloween right around the corner and ghosts top of everybody's mind, is take a look at some of the common myths that people have around no code. You know, there's still, despite the massive growth of low code and no code over the last few years, and you know, the desire for a lot of folks to rely on it more and more for their technology, there's still a lot of skeptics out there, and rightfully so. I mean, anything new and game changing always comes with a level of doubt, particularly from people who have been ingrained in doing things a certain way for a while. So what we wanted to do is just kind of take a few of the common myths that you hear around no code and bust them. Okay, so that's what Codebusters is. And I'm going to dig into 3 today, and it's going to be a little bit of showing Uncork. I mean, a lot of you have seen a lot of it. I'll reference back to some other episodes that we've done in the past where you can see, you know, some of the debunking, the busting of these myths in action and the configuration behind it. But I'll show a little bit again of the platform, a little bit of the config, and then also just talk about the myths themselves and, you know, why maybe some of them are unfounded, why maybe some of them need to really, you know, be looked at in a different perspective, and why some of them may also be common misconceptions and myths around code too, and like the things may not actually be as different as you think, whether you're doing something in no code or code, and maybe the problems that you foresee that you see with this is more a result of process and expectations and things like that, more so than even no code itself. So with that being said, I'm going to share my screen. I guess, like I said, I'm not going to necessarily always be showing stuff in it. So you can look at my little picture in the corner and, you know, look at the screen, but I want to have it up so I can easily just pull things up as necessary. So the first myth that we're going to talk about today is with no code, not all the features are possible. Not everything that you're going to want to do is possible. There's a lot of features that aren't going to be available, so on and so on and so forth. So, you know, I said we're going to come at this from a few different angles. And where I'm going to start with that actually is, doesn't that happen in code? You know, like I think many people who build it on Uncork have built with code in the past. Many people watching might be software engineers, and you know, if you're a product manager, if you're a salesperson who's going to your product and engineering team, or even if you're an engineer, at some point in time when you're writing code, you're going to tell your PM, yeah, no, we can't do that, right? It happens all the time. You can't do something in code, and that's not always necessarily a product of the code even, or the no code. You know, as you build more and more with code, as you continue to add, you know, new capabilities and leverage libraries that ultimately, you know, go out of style or no longer are supported, you get way more legacy in a code world than you get in a no code world, right? And once we talk about that all the time, like the difference in legacy or lack thereof between code and no code, the more legacy you get in an application, the harder, the more you have to say no. The more you can't do something, and the more, you know, that's what happens. So when you look at no code and you see that the same amount of legacy that you get in code doesn't happen with no code. You know, a really good example is when you look at like front end JavaScript libraries, things like Angular and React and Vue and Svelte and so on and so forth. You know, they all kind of go through cycles. They all go through releases that ultimately no longer become supported. Right. So if you're an organization that, you know, built heavily on top of maybe an older version of Angular, well, older versions of Angular are out of life right now. Right. They don't get any more support. They don't get any more long-term support. Security vulnerabilities come up. You know, performance issues come up. No new innovation into the framework comes up. And as a result, you then become blocked in code and unable to deliver features because they're no longer possible. with a no-code platform with something like Uncork, if that were the case, those are the type of things that the platform that Uncork takes care of for you, and you're just focusing on that business logic where there's far less legacy and far more things that are come up as a result of legacy that make you say no. So first and foremost, this is not something that is unique. This myth, I don't think, should be directed purely at no code. It should be directed across the board of all code. Okay. Second thing, thinking about it more from a more theoretical level rather than just an Uncork specific level, is there are many times where, and let's say it's an example of someone coming to you and asking for a feature, and you have to say no in code because of X, Y, and Z reason. It's always an opportunity, or I've always seen in my career, it's an opportunity to have a discussion around the feature. Okay. What is the need for the feature? What is the need for the feature as described? Oftentimes you have organizations structured such that the person creating the requirements for a given feature may not be intimately connected to the technology itself, right? You may have a product manager who isn't familiar with the underlying technology that the application that they're product managing is built in, which might result in them asking for things that aren't necessarily possible, be it a limitation of the code framework that you use, be a limitation of the legacy that you created for yourself in all the code that you've written. So first and foremost, with Uncork, or really low code and no code in general, one of the things that's really great about it is it brings those teams closer together. And that's not to say that there aren't organizations where product and engineering are always attached to the hip, and you don't have the product managers who understand the nuts and bolts of everything that they're managing. But you get that synergy, and you get that harmony, and you get that togetherness far more in a no-code platform where everyone is really able to contribute at all levels of the development process and all phases of the software development lifecycle, such that you're not going to necessarily even get as many feature requests of things that aren't possible when you generally understand what you're working with and the capabilities and the strengths and everything of the technology that's running your platform. Okay, so that bringing together that no code does for you, I think, is just in and of itself reduces even the prevalence of the scenarios that people believe this myth is for this myth to be true. Again, by jumping past it. But then even if you get to a point where you understand the technology, you ask for something well-intentioned and well thought and everything like that, you still may want to say no, right? And again, that goes back to just having the conversation around the feature itself. Okay. And what are alternatives to the feature? I think if someone comes in and says, well, a certain platform can't do X, therefore I'm not going to use this platform. Well, how important is that X? And is that X something that is so important to you that you are willing to throw away the value, all the other value and innovation that can come around it because of one single thing? I mean, I would never want to get super political on this, but like, you've heard of single issue voters, right? They don't necessarily have a good reputation in politics, someone who votes for a given party or for a given candidate based on a single issue, because they are ignoring the breadth of issues, the breadth of topics, that's going to make up a good candidate, that's going to make up of a successful term of that candidate. It all gets thrown out the window because of one simple thing, and think about that in software development too. If you focus on one thing and you see the forest for the trees, that whole quote, you're missing the point and you're missing all of the value. So it's always a good thing to, when someone says no, but the 5 whys, right? Just continue to dig in and say, well, why do you need this? And why do you need it as this? And what are other options that we can undertake with this? I think an example I think I've given on this Twitch before, when I had some of our design team on, was around rounded corners back in the old IE days, right? When rounded corners first became, the hot thing in web design, on buttons, on images, etc. that was something that in Chrome and Firefox was a breeze. CSS, border radius, you're done, right? But those were the days when IE7 and IE8 were still extremely prevalent in, around the world, particularly in enterprises. So I remember as a software engineer back then, getting the request to make rounded corners. And I cannot tell you how many times we would just use the border radius and call it a day. And then someone would come back and say, well, there's no rounded edges in IE. Go make rounded edges in IE. And we're like, well, that's a lot of work because I have to create these images that are curved and I need to position them in the four corners. And it adds weight to the page of having additional assets, and the load's going to not be as clean, so on and so forth. So it's like, so why do you really need the rounded corners for IE users, right? Like, does the button do its job? Does the other coloring and shading and whatever else you put on the button, is that not enough? And if the user of IE didn't see the mock-up or the wireframe that had the rounded corner, would they ever really think less of the button or the design because it doesn't have the rounded corner? So, just one simple example of when you get a feature request, don't always just take things at face value to determine whether or not, something is possible or really needs to be possible. Okay. But let's just assume all of that is just out the window, right? It's a legit request. Everybody wants it. It should be able to happen, so on and so on and so forth. You can do it in Uncork. There are so many features that exist in the platform natively that you can create through configuration. And again, rather than trying to necessarily walk through a lot of them and configure a lot of them today, go back and just look at some of the previous episodes that we've done on Uncork. We've built games with AI in them, right? You can play a visual, interactive game against the computer. You could build AI. I don't even need to talk about things like rounded corners that you can build, right? Asynchronous processing, workflows that have asynchronous parallel jobs, webhook calls, again, firing and forgetting calls. Like, that's such a common pattern in development now. Asynchronous, promise-based development. Those are things that are core to how Uncork functions and are the basis of so many features that you're going to want to build and workflows that you're going to want to create. Go take a look at the marketplace, or just the fact that the marketplace in and of itself is built with Uncork. The ability to search and filter and sort for the listings that you want, authenticate into an external application, and then download that package, effectively like fork it like you would in a Git-based system into your own environment and leverage that configuration, all built with no code. So just look at the marketplace on its own, and then look at the things inside the marketplace, to see the wealth of things and the wealth of features that are available. We talked about the UDLC many times, right? And those capabilities around deploying and testing and analyzing your configuration, documenting APIs, creating APIs, testing APIs, debugging APIs, profiling APIs. And these are all capabilities of Uncork that were built with Uncork, and those things would not be possible if the features were not available for us to do that. So I think, again, going just to kind of summarize all of that, when you think about the idea that not all features are possible, and, that again is something that exists in every piece of technology, that you're not probably going to be able to do every single thing the way that someone maybe necessarily wants it. You can do a ton, and you can always work to get yourself to a solution that is going to meet your business needs and satisfy your users. Okay. So the second myth that we're going to bust today is related to features again. And in fact, this was one myth that I split into two myths because it's a lot to talk about. I think I'm going to show a little bit more on this one. Is features were going to take longer. So some features are just going to take longer to build with no code. Okay. So the first thing I think, when you think about like will take longer, and then if you look at that from an individual feature perspective, once again, you're not seeing the forest for the trees. right? You are just looking at the tree and you're saying, hey, this tree is taking a very long time to grow, right? But then you look around and there's a million trees that have all grown around you. Okay. And how much time did all of that take versus how much time does this one tree take? And when you actually look at it all put together, you know, maybe it is take a little bit longer to do something in a no code platform than it would to write code, but you're gaining and saving so much more time in other places that that individual time loss that you might get for one specific feature is no longer, it's a drop in the bucket, right? And you're going to see that between programming languages too. It might take me way more time to write something in JavaScript than it does in Python. You know, it might take me way more time to write something in Ruby than to have done it in Ruby on Rails. You know, and so there's always difference in technologies, and there's always going to be time savings in different places of a technology platform. So if you're just looking at it at a specific feature basis and you're not taking into account everything else that comes with it, well, I think you're missing the overall point of the software development lifecycle and getting yourself from, you know, start to finish. That total time is going to come down. And I think this is an opportunity to show, you know, some of those capabilities that I could not imagine anymore having to write myself. Okay. So if I go into, you know, we've talked to think about RBAC before, the ability to define roles visually, the ability to assign and create groups that handle. So just, I mean, just look at the level, the way that you can configure groups here, right? I can say that for users in a given group, based on the roles they have, I can control access to people seeing data created by everybody, by data created by people who are lower than them in a role hierarchy, by data created people equal or lower to them in a hierarchy. This is complex stuff, people. This is very complex stuff. This is a point and a click in Uncork. This is, you know, rolling, you know, either it's building an entire RBAC system. And then just those things alone, just configuring your roles in your groups, assigning them to users to begin with is difficult. And then, you know, when you actually go into your applications, and I'll just go back to an old application here with the module, then to be able to apply that at a page level, as an API endpoint level, apply that down to the field level, you know, and have that respected throughout all the interactions in your application. That's a lot of time right there. So, you know, I think a lot of people, and I'll just be told, you might look at something like looping. Looping is something that Uncork does, but has other capabilities that try to streamline the cases where you say, oh, well, I need a loop here, but in fact, you don't need a loop. You need this kind of a merge. Okay. But if you just say, hey, I need a loop, you may find building a loop in Uncork to be a little more difficult than, you know, for each in JavaScript or something. But that's not where the delta in a loop in a no code platform versus a loop in code versus the delta between building a full blown RBAC system that applies at, you know, at every level, both in the UI, at the API, so on and so forth. Doing that in code on your own versus just leveraging it via a no code platform, you can write 16 million loops before you actually, you know, catch up on the time that you lost on RBAC. So, you know, that's one example. Let's talk about a couple other examples here. So workflow, right? This is sticking with RBAC here, right? So workflows in general, you know, workflows in general are hard. It's effectively in a lot of ways, it's a state management machine. It's managing the state of a process and how long it has gone through the various states, the orchestration of those states, the users who are going to be involved in those states. You know, with excuse me, some of the more, you know, advanced capabilities around gateways and being able to parallelize end user processes and merge processes, the ability to fork processes, the ability to start processes at different times and all of that, and then apply RBAC through swim lanes in terms of who's going to interface at the various state of a given execution. I mean, it took it took our engineers a really long time to build workflow, right? You don't have to do that anymore. That again, that delta there is going to be far greater than saying, oh, well, a certain no code platform's workflow doesn't do this one thing the way I want. Well, guess what? Look what else you got in the process. Okay. So we have RBAC, we have workflow. We've shown a million times integrations. We did the APIs with IPAs series a couple months ago, right? And in 30 minutes at a clip, we were integrating to APIs we'd never seen before, integrating with the Twitch API, having never looked at it before, integrating with, a fantasy football API, integrating with a beer database. I think those are three of the examples that come to mind, right? That was a simple configuration. And let me just, for folks who may not have been around, pulling up the services administration screen, in order to set up your integration, and we'll just take the sports data one that I did last, you just define the endpoint and some subscription key. You're done. And then people can just freely use it. You don't have to worry about, actually constructing the HTTP call and code. You don't have to worry about making the call, handling the error, retrying the error. Those are settings of Uncork's visual interface to set up an API call that is going to save you tremendous amount of time. And knowing how frequent you're making API calls in decoupled systems today, distributed systems today, leveraging the API economy, that's something that you're going to be doing time and time and time and time and time again. And each time that you do it in Uncork, you're saving time from having to do it in code, which, those common events that you're saving time on is going to win you back any time that you think you might lose trying to do something else, that is possible per our last myth, but yeah, maybe a little bit longer than others, and then I think another great example there is the grids. Go check out our sessions on grids and what they can do, particularly the dynamic grid, even though I've got this uniform grid up one highlighted, the dynamic grid, the ability to just, make the API call, throw it into a grid and be able to group it, aggregate it, sort it, pivot it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. No code required to do that. It's massive, massive time savings that again are going to make up for, potential other time savings, right? And then just in general on top of that, so that's like the core features of Uncork that are going to save you a ton of time and things that you would have had to done in code. But then there's also the things that you then can configure with Uncork, like configuring a UI in Uncork, just coming in here, and dragging in text fields and descriptions and things of that nature, right? That's typically injecting a bunch of, writing a bunch of HTML in over and over and over again. It flies. You can drag a few fields onto a screen, put a button onto a screen, and you're collecting data. You're saving data to a database by dragging 3 fields and a button onto a screen. You've now collected data in a database, right? And then the validations that you can apply on top of that. Validations are not simple. So again, the level, the speed that you gain in other places completely, I think, outweighs the additional time if you do come across something, that is faster with code. But even if something is faster with code, I mean, that's okay to me, at least, and I think to many of us, that's okay, right? Because if you look at most systems that are being developed right now, it is very rarely one single technology and one single platform. It's a combination of platforms, microservices, systems, et cetera, coming together, being composed to serve the end user, to serve the end result that you need for your users, right? So even in a world of code, you probably don't have 100% of a single language. 100% in a single platform. And those pieces are coming together because, programming languages even have benefits for different use cases, right? You're going to use certain programming, everyone uses a lot of Python in data science, right? Because there are elements of that language that make it better suited for data science than other languages, You know, Rust is a very popular language now. I still got to toy around with it. I love the name. I don't know why. I just love the name Rust. But that's used for, I think, really high performance stuff, what you're not going to get from other languages. And of course, then you have like JavaScript and stuff, which is going to be where you're going to write pretty much 100% of your front end. And these days, a lot of your back end too, right? But it's very rare that you have one, and it's more common that you're going to have multiple that are going to allow you to get time savings for different things and compose them together to have the most efficient application overall. And that doesn't go away when you choose a no-code platform. Just by choosing a no-code platform, we're not asking, and I don't think any no-code platform out there is asking you to all of a sudden start to put all your eggs in that basket. It's still a smart technology decision to choose the right tool for the job. And there are a ton. And I think, if you look at the customers and you look at the number of organizations that are using no-code platforms like Uncork now, there is thousands and millions or whatever, order of magnitude we want to use here of use cases that are extremely well suited for no code. Use them for that. And if you need to write code because you need to write code or you want to write code, go and do it and make them play nicely together, leveraging those integration frameworks I was just talking about. Right. So, this idea of things are going to be longer, again, just doesn't just, I think, require you to think about specific features, what's longer and what's not, but thinking about the entire situation, thinking about the entire application you're building, and where you're going to get time savings in each, picking the right tool for that job to give you the most savings, composing them together into the most, stable and reliable and performant and fast application, fast time to market application that you could possibly have. All right. So those are myths 1 and 2. So myth 1 was not all features are possible. And I think we, again, gave you a few examples, pointed you, go check out all of our, really for any of these myths, just go look at the Uncork's Twitch channel and our YouTube channel for the older episodes to see, us debunking these in action. And again, I'm just talking more on a theoretical level here right now. So not all features are possible. It's not true. Not all features are going to take longer. It's not true, So let's get to the last one. And this one, I'm actually going to show a little bit of config, and it is config that I did years ago. So it's just pretend I'm doing it live. And when it comes to complex logic, now there's a million ways that we can show complex logic. Again, just thinking about the use cases that our customers come to us with, thinking about all of the applications we've shown you thus far, or even just looking at the Uncork marketplace, right? So if I go to the Uncork marketplace and I'm just on these are just our snippets right here, just look through the snippets and tell me these things don't have complex logic, right? Look through our integrations and some of the really complex systems that you can integrate with, right? Look through our templates and some of the full-blown applications that could be built. Client, look, automated workflows. That sounds complex. It is complex. We have something in our marketplace that effectively can do it for you. User registration. I think in most platforms, no one's even rolling their own user registration anymore because it's so complex. And our module template inside of the marketplace is a blend of all of the things of the Uncork platform that help accelerate and make easier the concepts and secure, really more than anything, the concepts around user registration, and then the configuration that we can provide on top of that to turn that over to end users, not just administrators, right? So the marketplace is a great way, plus again, all of our previous episodes on Twitch and YouTube, to think about complex subjects. But I'm going to dig into one specific marketplace to really just, I think, hammer home complexity, right? And it's this snippet called distance calculation. Okay, so what the snippet does, as it says, it leverages the Haversine formula, which is used to calculate the distance between 2 points on Earth using their latitude and longitude. If anyone watching this Twitch knows how to do that and can tell me, given 2 points of lat and long, you can calculate how many miles, meters, centimeters, whatever you want apart they are, please join the Twitch right now and show me. And try to show me faster than I'm going to show you, right? That is some hard stuff. But you see it. You see it in store locators and things of that nature. Google must be using it, to an extent when in Google Maps when they want to tell you how far things are, although they're usually going through different directions, which is going to obviously, this is as the crow flies, right? So that's really, it's hard if you just talk about it. Let me show you, right? So this is actually this is the formula. And this is actually the website that we used to effectively reverse engineer the formula into the Uncork snippet. All right, so I'm going to just open up the Uncork snippet now too. Okay, and here it is, right? It's some fields to collect some data, your location, address, a data workflow, surprise, surprise, in order to do it. And not a crazy data workflow. I've seen way bigger ones. And just like you see humongous methods in your code, where someone says, wow, this method is 100 lines, you should probably, not do that. But here it is, right? And it's just doing things, it's just leveraging throughout the process. It's leveraging the Excel-like formulas that are available to you in Uncork to do the calculations necessary for the formula. So if I look back at this, here is the formula. All right, it says A equals sine squared delta theta, maybe, I don't know, divided by 2 plus cosine theta 1 plus cosine theta 2 times sine squared delta lambda divided by 2. C equals 2A tan 2. I can't even read it, right? Like I don't know. College is a long time ago at this point. I probably learned this stuff back then, right? But this is the formula. Someone come in and tell me this isn't complex, right? And then here's the JavaScript that someone then wrote to achieve this formula in JavaScript. Again, tell me this is not complex, okay? Like I can't even, I could obviously copy paste this JavaScript. I certainly probably couldn't have written this JavaScript on my own, at least not anymore. Maybe back when I was a way better developer, but even then I probably wasn't good enough, So this is the formula in JavaScript based on this formula, this mathematical formula, right? This is complex stuff. And if I hop over to Uncork, I can let me just delete this, right? I'll start fresh. I go into my snippets tray. I grab in my distance calculator. I hit submit. I hit preview. And let's check it out, right? So I'll start at the Uncork office. All right. And let's see, how far is that from 1600 Pennsylvania Ave? There you go. How far is that from, I think we all know where Pennsylvania, what's at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, right? That's it. 205.55 miles, right? Let's add another destination. And let's say, are there any other like notable destinations? Anyone have let me look at the chat. Anyone have a notable address? What if I just wrote, 90210, 90210, Beverly Hills. Is that going to work? Google Maps going to like that? No, they're not going to like that. 123 Fake Street. Is there a 123 Fake Street out there? 123 Main Street? Is there a 123 Main Street in New York? There we go. To get to Flushing. All right. You want to go get some Chinese food, go to Flushing, Main Street in Flushing, you get some of the best Chinese food in New York. That's 8.6 miles from Union Square, where Uncork's office is. And you saw that calculated wicked fast, right? That's hard. And that's now available to you as a snippet that you can drop in, which is going to go through. It's something that you can understand, right? You're going to step through and you're going to say, okay, well, this is calculating that A. So I come back over here and this was the A. So this really, really complex looking mathematical formula gets broken down into a few Excel-like formulas in here, which then get multiplied at the end, so on and so on. And then we do some converting, converting from meters to feet, converting from feet to miles, right? So now I've got it at multiple different levels, and then I'm sorting it by my distance in meters. Okay, if I go look actually in the console, right, of this, and go look at the underlying data, first and foremost, let's look at the address that I started with. Okay, so the address I started with, just by using this out of the box address component, I get back, the details. Of course, this is coming from an API, but I get back the details of the address broken down. I get back the lat long that is necessary. Of course, if you're doing this, you're not going to go figure that out. You're going to call some API to do it as well, but that's complex. And then to get that back and then do something with it, right? And then the output, it's complex. Now we opted to keep all the attributes of it when in the end all you really want are these three things, but there they are. Okay, and I can just continue to add destination, continue to do the calculation. So when you think about Uncork doing and you being a no-code application that's serving the financial services, the insurance industry, you can imagine that actuarial formulas can get probably far more complex than they have seen, but this is a pretty darn complex formula if you ask me, right? Financial services, and they obviously, if that wasn't a complex industry, bankers wouldn't be rolling in dough, right? We wouldn't have the Wolf on Wall Street movie if that industry wasn't complex and the people in it, didn't make a lot of money as a result of it, right? So complexity exists in all of the industries that use no code these days. They exist in all the companies that are using Uncork these days. They exist in things such as this, and then they exist here in Uncork. So I've been looking for a good reason to talk about this snippet for a while because I think it's just such a good example of the levels of complexity. And of course, you make this formula even more complex and you still can solve it. And then you can solve it. This, not only did I do this, and this is a really good example, right? Where we talked about looping earlier. If I were to do this in code, right? This would be a for loop. I would have a for, and then I would go for each address, and then I would calculate it and do it. There is no for loop here, but this is all looping, right? This is calculating the distance for each and every address that comes in through my UI here that collects multiple addresses. So again, please tell me that's not complex, folks. Tell me it's not complex. I know that Peter Venkman would think it's quite complex. So that's it. So that was, I think, my example on complexity in Uncork. And again, just as, and this ties, I think, a lot back to the first myth around not having all the features. I mean, I can go look at the marketplace, look at the UDSC, look at some of the games we built. Look at any other application that we've demoed to you. A lot of features and a lot of complexity of those features, all available to you in no code, but I think even better available to you within Uncork's no code. So there it is. That's my Codebusters myths 1, 2, 3. As I said, we may come back with more and more of these myths throughout the month as we approach Halloween and all of that. So thank you for everybody. And I hope now, you're starting to feel that you ain't afraid of no code. And if there is something bad and it don't look good, who are you going to call? Codebusters. Bye, folks.